Welcome again to Justin and Donald Save America. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendall. Joining me today, I've got Justin Haskins. What are you, editorial director at the Heartland Institute? What's the title you even want me to? Co-author of the upcoming book on the Great Reset? That's probably a better title.
For a Great Reset video, yeah, that probably makes
start
sense.
off with that.
You got to make sure you name drop Glenn Beck in there, though. Otherwise, no one cares if I'm
co-authoring it with Glenn Beck. Okay,
that sounds a lot better. Once that
let's
book
take
becomes,
it from the top.
Yeah, let's start over again. Once that book's a New York Times bestseller, I'm gonna make you introduce me as New York Times best-selling author. No, not co-author. Author. Justin Haskins. And also, now that I have you on here, well, I mean, this really isn't the time for this. This is kind of back end stuff. But when I occasionally want to do my own solo videos without you, because, what's the point? And what I want when we do this is I want the same backdrop that you have on here for the YouTube channel, but I want a big red X through your cartoon character on the top left. Can we do that? Can we make that? And then I want to cross your name out and Justin and Donald Save America on the shield, so it just says Justin, and then write in an S that says Saves America. That's what I want.
Yeah, we could do that.
Let's make that
totally
happen.
Doable. That's totally doable.
Let's find a way to make that happen.
Yes, welcome back to Justin and Donald Save America. This is our second episode. This is kind of our first real episode because that first one was kind of like, this is what to expect from our show. So it's an important one. You should definitely check out that first episode. There's some important stuff that we talked about, but this will be kind of the first real episode where you actually kind of see what episodes of the future will look like. They'll probably resemble this more or less than the first one, I should say. But the episode, the main meat of this episode is going to be the Great Reset, and why it's so important, why we need to take it super serious, why it's not just a conspiracy theory that's being bandied about by conservatives or people on our side of the aisle or anything like that. And that'll probably be the meat of the episode. I don't know if we'll be able to have time to fit in much else. So, Great Reset, Justin. Where should we start?
Yeah, I mean, the Great Reset is, I think, the most important topic facing America today. It's the most important topic facing the Western world today. It explains so many other things that are happening, and people don't really realize it. But I think it's important at the outset to say there are very few people on the face of the earth who have spent more time researching the Great Reset than we have. It's probably us, Glenn Beck, a couple people on Glenn Beck's research team, and that's pretty much it.
That's probably it.
That's probably the list. Everyone else is in the Great Reset, so they don't really count.
Yeah, John Kerry's not included in that.
Right, exactly. You can't count the evil masterminds when you're talking about researching what the evil masterminds are up to. That doesn't really count. So I mean, nobody has done more research on this than we have. We know it inside and out. We have studied it for over a year and a half. And the reason I bring all this up is because
we literally co-wrote the book on the Great
We're writing the book on the Great Reset. Well, actually, it's all written now. You, me, and Glenn Beck, and, like I said, there's been some other people with his team that have helped with research and stuff, but that's pretty much it. So the reason I bring all that up is because if you just started Googling the Great Reset and you started reading articles from New York Times or whatever, Washington Post, and I don't even know, but I'm sure that if you did this, that's exactly what you would find an article that would come up that I guarantee you'll find an article that will talk about it being a right-wing conspiracy theory, and they'll talk about everyone who's involved in it is a conspiracy theorist lunatic that thinks that, I don't know, they'll talk about crazy things about vaccines maybe, or something that really has nothing to do with the things that we talk about. I guarantee they will make an allegation that is totally and completely untrue.
Well, Russell Brand's on it, so that's a good sign.
Well, Russell Brand is on it. And he's more on our side than he is on their side.
That's true.
I mean, do like a news search, yeah. Scroll down a little bit. Let's see if we can find something from a real source. There isn't even anything here.
Nobody's
really.
Even talking about it. That's another strategy. They just avoid talking about it. Period. Oh, the Irish
Great
Catholic.
Resignation. That's good. Search New York Times. I guarantee the New York
crazy.
Times. I guarantee the New York Times has done a story on this. I guarantee it.
Seeking solutions to global challenges. As we rebuild our economies, should we be focused on a great reset to economic models responsible for obscene gaps between rich and poor? Was this written by Klaus Schwab? Because that is like almost
actually,
a direct quote.
That actually sounds a lot like Klaus Schwab there. Wow.
But yeah, it almost looks like they're trying to avoid it more than anything.
It's true.
It's not even a. Not
so I mean, that's
conspiracy theory.
Search Great Reset conspiracy theory.
Well, then obviously.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying I bet you'll find something in the New York Times. That's my point.
Sure.
But I mean, the idea that we got to read this article in the New York Times that you just found here.
Yeah, by the New York Times. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely got to read that. But anyway, look, the thing is, the Great Reset, when it is talked about by the mainstream press, which is almost never, they frame it as though it's a conspiracy theory. They frame it as though anybody that talks about it is some radical lunatic who, again, is just totally devoid of reality, thinks that, lizard people are really ruling the world and things like that. And the truth is, there is a mountain of evidence that shows that the Great Reset isn't a conspiracy theory, that it isn't something that should be ignored, that it isn't something that, is just, let's talk about it for 5 minutes and then move on to something else, or, it's just one crazy quote. No, it is a sweeping, complete transformation of society if it were actually to happen. And it is in the process of happening right now. It's not even something that could happen into the future. It is happening. So I think so many of the things that you see in the world today, when Amazon bans books, when Major League Baseball moves the All-Star game from Atlanta to Colorado, to Denver, when you have American Airlines and Coca-Cola getting involved in woke causes, when you have Bank of America promoting ESG scores, when you have the 6 largest banks in America saying, we're not going to do business with fossil fuel companies anymore in the future. In fact, we're going to go net zero carbon dioxide emissions throughout our entire portfolio. So if you are using carbon dioxide emissions, you're going to have to start phasing them out, or else you're not going to get a bank account. Mm-hmm. When all these things start happening, it's not just a coincidence. They're all tied together. And at first, it doesn't necessarily seem like that. It may just seem like this sort of disjointed, look at all these crazy things happening in the world. It's not like that at all. In reality, these things are all tied together. And again, not a conspiracy theory, 100% supportable by the evidence. And we're going to go over it in pretty good detail today. You're not going to get everything that we know about it, because it's just, you got to read a book to do that.
There might be one coming out in like January.
Yeah, exactly. The book will be coming out in January, and it's going to be awesome. And if you are interested in this topic, you're going to learn just about everything you need to learn from that. But also, we literally couldn't fit it all into an hour-long episode anyway. I mean, There's just way too much to talk about. You and I could just talk about the monetary aspect of it for over an hour. So it's an incredibly important topic, and frankly, you're not going to hear about it from too many other people.
Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, like you said, we can't possibly cover every facet of this thing. We'd be here for ever. We could do a whole series on this. So where should we start? Should we start off by like how we came upon this? I mean, we kind of covered that a little bit in episode 1, just kind of reading off all the quotes. Should we take a look at some of the quotes? What do you think would be the best way to kind of access this concept?
Well, I think we should start with the quotes, because I think that this illustrates beyond a shadow of a doubt that at the very least, there are very powerful people saying some really crazy crap. And what they mean by it is going to take more explanation, but it's going to at least show that this isn't just a figment of our imaginations.
Right. Yeah.
They really are, in actuality, saying things that are really crazy, and they're talking about taking over the world, and they're talking about making dramatic changes to the world and everything else. Go click on the Great Reset tab.
So we got stoppingsocialism.com up here if you're following us, if you're watching the show on YouTube or Facebook or wherever we have it streaming. Top right, Great Reset tab, click on that. Wait for my computer to load. Scroll down, look at all this Great Reset content that we have here for you to check out. This is the article I'm looking for. 30 of the craziest quotes supporting the anti-capitalism Great Reset by world leaders. So this is something that we posted a long time ago that was just, there's probably more things that we could add to this. There's been definitely quotes since. Yeah, but this is kind of what, again, we kind of talked about this a little bit in episode 1, but it was these quotes that kind of tipped us off that there was something here, that there was, these people seem to be reading off of the same playbook. So what is the playbook? Like, what's going on here? So here's some of the quotes. So let's see. Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, quote, "We only have one planet, and we know that climate change could be the next global disaster, even with more dramatic consequences for mankind. We have to decarbonize the economy in the short window we still have remaining and bring our thinking and behavior once more into harmony with nature." Prince Charles, UK, "In order to secure our future and to prosper, we need to evolve our economic models and put people and planet at the heart of global value creation. If there is one critical lesson to learn from this crisis, it is that we need to put nature at the heart of how we operate. We simply can't waste any more time." So again, just kind of putting nature at the center of things. It's like, was Klaus and Prince Charles like talking before they put out these statements? It's like very similar. Prince Charles, "We have a golden opportunity to see something good from this crisis," talking about COVID-19. "Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change." Which other ones should I read here, Justin?
Well, the sort of classic one is the one from Klaus Schwab, where he essentially says that, you know, everybody has to participate in the Great Reset. Mm-hmm. And that, it says
Klaus Schwab, "A great reset is necessary to build a new social contract that honors the dignity of every human being."
Yeah, there's another one. What it says, "The world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism." Mm-hmm. That one is sort of the classic Great Reset quotes. We also have quotes from Klaus Schwab talking about how we need to have, we need to reimagine capitalism. The social contract needs to be changed. We've got John Kerry talking about that. There's a John Kerry quote right there.
That's Al Gore. This is the time for a great reset. John Kerry, "This is a big moment. The World Economic Forum is really going to have to play a front and center role in refining the Great Reset to deal with climate change and inequality, all of which is being laid bare as a consequence of COVID-19. So it's just like again and again and again. There's the Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations. There was a person from the like Greenpeace. There's like so many people when you go down this list that are all saying very similar stuff. Yeah. This is what tipped us off to this.
Right, and not just from international organizations, but also from corporations, which, you know, really are international organizations in a way, but sure. But you know, you've got big multinational corporations, big banks, activists, not just at activist organizations, but individual activists. You've got, it's a who's who of powerful elites globally talking about the Great Reset. And you know, you don't necessarily, when you read these quotes and you read, like, for example, that right there, that quote from Sharon Burrow that you're scrolling past, "We need to design policies to align with investment in people and the environment. But above all, the longer term perspective is about rebalancing economies," right? I mean, what exactly does she mean by that? When she says we have to look at how to build a better economy alongside the convergent crisis of environment, which is not going to go away, what does she mean by that? What does it mean when she talks about building balanced economies? What do they mean when they say "build back better," which is a common slogan that many world leaders have adopted, tied to the World Economic Forum, including, of course, Joe Biden, who's used that same phrase? What do they mean by this? What are they talking about? So I think the first thing to think about when you're trying to understand the Great Reset is, what is the justification for it? Now, they hinted at it in some of those quotes, right? The first big justification is COVID, all right? That's when Prince Charles said it's a golden opportunity to, you know, change the world, or whatever he was saying there. When he said a golden opportunity, he was referring, and he said this crisis, he's talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. This was the opportunity they had to change the world. We can't go back. We have to do things differently. We have to push the reset on capitalism, the reset button on capitalism. We have to reimagine capitalism. These things that they're saying, that the reason they're saying that is because they have this golden opportunity. The whole global economy had collapsed, not because of COVID, but because of government's reaction to COVID. They essentially collapsed the global economy, and then they said we got to build it back better next time. We can't build it back the way it was before. We can't go back to the status quo. You'll hear all these things like that. They talk about the status quo all the time. We gotta move beyond that to something bigger and better, right? And that we may never get another quote from Prince Charles, which I don't know if it's in there, that article or not, but he says something like, we may never get another opportunity like this. That people are receptive to big visions of change. We may not get that opportunity again. This might be our best opportunity. So that's the initial justification. The long-term justification was hinted at in many of these quotes that you reference. It's climate change.
Yeah.
Because COVID-19 isn't going to last forever. But climate change is that crisis. I know. It feels like it's going to last forever. But I assure you that the day will come when the world will not be shut down by COVID. And they know this. So they need a crisis that's so big, so powerful, so long-lasting, so existential in its potential danger, that they have to reset the global economy, not just in the short term, but in the long term, forever. We can never go back. Even when COVID is gone, it doesn't matter. Or not totally gone, but even when it's not as bad as it was at the height of the pandemic, it doesn't matter. Right. We can never go back, because if we do go back, we're all going to die from climate change, right? So that's the long-term justification. And now, do I believe that they think that either of these things actually demands having a great reset, that we have to have a great reset in order to save us from an existential crisis of climate change, that we have to have a great reset because we can't possibly go back to the way things were 2 years ago? We can't do that. No, I don't think so. I think that the real justification is they want to consolidate power. They want to get wealthier and more powerful, and the elites want to have more control over the world. That's not a crazy thing. Elites often want more control and more money and more power, right? But that's a real justification. But the stated justifications that they're selling to the public are these other things. Yeah. So I think that's the foundation upon which all of the Great Reset language is built. It's those two justifications.
Mm-hmm. So when we first started kind of talking about this, we always kind of segmented what the Great Reset meant into two categories. One was the all of the stuff that you'd find and more from the Green New Deal, whether it's overhaul of energy policy, free college, universal health care, everything on that wish list that they labeled the Green New Deal, right? And then the other part was a little bit more in the weeds, but it's the ESG standards and all of that. I think you referenced it either in this episode or the first one as the social credit score for companies, to make sure that we can figure out who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, who are the corporations that need to be punished and who are the ones that need to get rewarded, right? Do you still kind of look at it that way, as these two little separate silos that together kind of make the Great Reset?
I mean, I think it's a good way of explaining it, right? I think the Great Reset includes many, many different components, but if you're going to boil it all down to two things, I think it's exactly what you said. The Great Reset is, in one way, a movement to expand government, expand the welfare state, add the Green New Deal, big infrastructure programs. All of that stuff's part of the Great Reset, sure. But that stuff's part of liberalism and progressivism and socialism just inherently. It's just always on the agenda, right?
Right.
The part that's so unique and so different and so interesting to me is not that stuff. Although those things are important, we already know about those things. The things that really interest me is the second part of the equation. It's how are they going to transform capitalism? When they talk about ending the era of shareholder capitalism and creating a stakeholder capitalist economy, what does it even mean? What do they mean by that? How are they going to make the economy so different from what it was before? They keep talking about how we can't go back to the way things were before, but notice they're not as upfront about what it means to build this new society that they're talking about. You really have to dig down deep to find those answers, right? And so I do think it's good to think of it in that way, that on the one hand, they want the big sweeping socialist or progressive programs, but and then on the other hand, they want to reshape capitalism through these other mechanisms, but it's the other mechanisms that's the really nefarious, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Because people don't know about it and because it's really hard to see. I know when they pass the Green New Deal. We're all going to know when they pass the Green New Deal because it's going to be big headlines everywhere. It's going to be a big debate. It's going to be big fights in Congress, right? If they actually were to pass it, everyone would know about it.
Sure.
But nobody knows about what's going on with the other stuff. That's the way that they're transforming the economy through the financial system, through corporations and all of that. The other half of the Great Reset, people don't know about it.
Yeah,
because it's behind the scenes.
And it might be the most effective way of carrying out these same things that they are pushing for.
And that's honestly why I think they're doing it that way.
Right.
Because it's like a plan A and a plan B in a way. We're going to throw everything we've got at it, right? Because we've got this golden opportunity. So we might as well throw everything we can. We're going to try on the political side, but we know that that's tough. We're also going to try our backup through this other way. And we're going to win somehow. We don't know how. Maybe we'll get a little over here on the government side and a little over there through the banking financial system corporation side. Maybe we'll rely mostly on that side. But whatever. The point is, we're going to throw everything we've got at it in order to change society.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like the Green New Deal. We already talked about it. That was something that when it was kind of being tossed around, it was almost being written off as a joke. We've had colleagues in our think tank industry just like, yeah, we're not even going to talk about it. It's so goofy. It's so expensive. Right. There's no way it's going to even come close to passing. Like, we're not even going to waste our breath on it, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And like, you know, obviously we did spend some time on it. It got way more play than some of our colleagues thought it would and all of that. But it does kind of show that something like that's got like such a ridiculous price tag attached to it and such a ridiculous character like AOC pushing for it, it only went so far, you know? But it's like some of these things, and also it kind of created this stink that like anything that was a part of the Green New Deal, now if it's independently brought up, it's like, oh, this is just like a great New Deal or a Green New Deal thing being, you know, proposed here. Like, forget about it, right? So it's got that like baggage, that political baggage that's going to hamper some of those things that are found inside that plan from actually materializing politically. But on the other side of things, when we're going to talk about this, the other pillar of this Great Reset concept can kind of ramrod through some of these things without the requirement of legislation or anything like that. It would be done under the cover of, this is just free markets. These are just independent private companies figuring out what they want to do with their resources and all of that to kind of push through all of this stuff that might not be able to happen politically. Yeah. And to me, as we started kind of talking about this and fleshing out that kind of that second column, and we should probably get into it right now, that to me was like the more interesting component of the Great Reset. So let's talk about it, you know, in the context of the social credit scores, right? So I think the social credit scores was something that a lot of people didn't hear about until we started talking about it, or people like us started talking about it in like China, right? So China decided to create the way that they were going to be able to control their population and figure out who gets rewarded with certain privileges and who gets punished in certain ways. They developed this social credit score. And it was just like based on different websites that you would go on, whether or not you had traffic tickets or if you were caught jaywalking or just, you know, anything were reported by neighbors or anything like that, they would generate a score for you. And depending on how high or low your score is, it allowed you to ride a train or buy real estate in certain areas or a whole host of different benefits or drawbacks or anything like that, right? The Great Reset, the component that I'm talking about, that second column to all of this, is that same idea, except for in relation to companies. So explain that concept a little bit more.
Right. So essentially, if you're the elites and you want to transform the economy and you want businesses to start promoting your ideas. You want businesses and corporations to start doing things that you like. And in these cases, it often is left-wing causes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. You want the businesses to start adopting left-wing causes. How can you do that? How do you get them on board with these things, right? Historically, businesses usually lean to the right because they don't like taxes. They don't want to pay lots of taxes historically. Historically, more taxes for them means lower growth. They make less money. They have to lay off employees. It causes problems for them. They don't want that historically. So that problem of how do we get businesses, instead of fighting against all these big, gigantic, multi-billion-dollar corporations, how do we get them to just join us on the left to do the things that we want? How do we, or not even on the left necessarily, again, like just elites, how do you get them on board? How do the people at all these big international institutions like the United Nations, for example, get big corporations to promote UN ideas like Agenda 2030 and things like that? How do we get them to do that? What they came up with was, let's create a system that literally, just like you said, provides a whole new framework for awarding, for evaluating businesses, very similar to the social credit scoring system, where we actually will identify the good companies and the bad companies, and good and bad in this case just means, are you doing what the elites want or not? And we're going to have a scoring system that helps us determine that. And then we can provide incentives and rewards for the good guys. And we can either punish the bad guys or just withhold our good grace from them. And then they just will wither away and die on their own, right? This is sort of the idea. We can start incentivizing them. And then if we could just get banks and we could just get investors to also use these scores to punish and reward the good and the bad guys, then we could really accelerate this thing, right? So we could have government having this incentive system, carrot and stick system. We could have banks doing it, and we could have investors doing it. And if we're all doing it, then they will have to go along with it. They'll have no choice but to do whatever we tell them. So if we just build the metrics to say, you know, are you doing enough to fight climate change, right? How good are you at fighting climate change? How much land are you consuming? How much plastic do you use? How much, what's the ratio of Asian to Hispanic workers at your company? Do you have too many Asians? Because we don't need more Asians at your company. We need more Hispanics. These are all real examples.
You might think he's joking, but
I'm not joking. These are all real examples from this system that they've designed, this framework. So they built this system, this framework years ago, it turns out, many years ago, before they ever came up with the slogan, The Great Reset. They built this framework and they decided, many people at the United Nations and at World Economic Forum and other places decided this would be the future. If we could just build this framework and get these big corporations to all sign up for it and get investors to put money into this, then we will get all of these big corporations moving in the right direction. So they built this framework. They call it ESG, Environmental, Social, and Governance Standards, okay? Each of those are categories of scoring. That's why it's ESG. E is the environment. Those are the global warming and stuff like that I just talked about. The S is social, right? So how woke are you? How good are you at making sure that, you're hiring the right minorities? You have enough women in management. You got enough women on the board of directors. If you have, all of these companies have boards. Do you do enough for your community? Where are you doing business? And some of these things aren't even necessarily bad. Like, for example, in the social category, a lot of these ESG scoring systems have a category about child labor. Are you engaging in indirectly even in child labor? Are you buying products from things that are produced in part with child labor? So there's all these scoring systems. Governance is usually about how your company operates, how much people are getting paid, things like that. So they built this entire framework. And over the past decade or more, big corporations all over the world have, because there's been all this backroom pressure from investors and from other people, banks and investors, to adopt this, they've been building these ESG frameworks at large corporations all over the world. Mm-hmm. Even though most people don't even know that it exists. They've been doing this all over the world for a long time.
So let's dissect this a little bit, because this whole ESG thing It seems like when you just hear these letters rambled off, it's alphabet soup type of thing. It's just like it gets a little muddled or whatever. But this is like an extremely important component to all of this. So, like you were saying, historically, companies, they just want to turn a profit and not get taxed or whatever. They just want to focus on just doing the product or service that they have built around better and better each year. Like that's all they want to do. Okay. ESG almost turns it to where making a profit is secondary. Getting a high ESG score is the primary focus for them, right? So this is this is the change from the stakeholder, from the shareholder capitalism to the stakeholder capitalism, because now companies aren't trying to just make profit at any cost, which is the kind of the talking point from some of these Great Reset leaders. Now they have to take all stakeholders into account when they're making business decisions. So this is the big change. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Right. So this concept of shareholder capitalism is sort of a derogatory term that these people who are elites, who usually lean on the left ideologically, these people have they've come up with this term shareholder capitalism as a derogatory term to refer to a market economic system where the shareholders of a company, the owners of a company, and the employees of a company, and the customers of a company, those people are prioritized. So all the people who do business with the company in some fashion are prioritized. And they see this as a bad thing, right? So they don't want you to focus on just the people involved in the company. What they want the companies to do is focus on stakeholders. Well, who are stakeholders? Stakeholders are everybody. Everyone is a stakeholder. Now, everyone is a stakeholder, but not everyone gets to go to Davos and sit at the table and make their, little ESG metric systems. But everyone is supposedly a stakeholder. So what stakeholder actually means is collective. Yeah. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to find a way to make the company do something that's not in its own best interest in a normal market economy. Maybe, for example, buy electric vehicles for all their, let's say you have a company that's like Pizza Hut or something, or Domino's, right? Domino's delivers lots of pizzas. So you say, okay, Domino's, we know it's more expensive to have all electric vehicles than just have little Honda Civics running on gasoline, driving around, delivering Domino's pizza. So we're going to build a system that actually incentivizes you to spend more money than you need to, because we want you to drive electric vehicles even though they're more expensive. Yeah. So we're going to give you some reward for doing this, and we're going to punish your competitors who continue to use the more affordable form of transporting pizza. This is the idea, right? They really want you to adopt electric vehicles, for example, but they know it's too expensive for you to do it ordinarily, doesn't make good sense in terms of your business. So they create a system that says, well, yeah, it might hurt your profit and losses, but we're going to make up for it in other ways by giving you a higher ESG score, which will give you all these other financial benefits.
So I want to get to the carrot and the stick too, but just one more kind of point on this. So it might actually sound good to some of the people that are listening to this. Like, okay, so the company has to take everybody into account when they're making decisions versus just making money at any cost. Maybe that's a good thing. But the way to look at, because that's their phraseology, right? That's the way that's the picture that they're trying to paint for you.
Correct.
In reality, a company is just trying to make goods and services as high quality and as low cost as possible, so that you, as the consumer, vote with your dollar and buy that product or service. So you, as the individual consumer, is still you're generating the engine, right? You're driving the engine for this company to tell them whether or not they're doing a good thing or a bad thing, with you giving your money towards them. The standards that are being crafted, like on behest to help the collective, right, as you put it, that's not you and me all went to a town meeting and started drafting up what these ESG standards are. No, these are top down from these World Economic Forum globalist types, right? So this idea that it's like corporations versus the collective, that's a falsehood. It's the individual versus the elites. That's the real dichotomy here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the whole thing with these companies Instead of trying to make a profit, which sounds bad, they're trying to make sure that their ESG score is as high as possible.
Right.
So why would they do that? So that's where I want to get to the carrot and the stick thing. So we've talked about how if you have a low ESG score, you can theoretically be punished. If you have a high one, you could theoretically be rewarded. How? Let's tackle that.
Right. So there are a few different ways that they have gone about incentivizing, coercing, and threatening companies to go along with this over a long period of time. About 80%, it's actually more than 80% of large corporations in the United States already have ESG systems. And this has been happening for a while. That data is a couple years old. So even before they came up with the Great Reset slogan, they had these ESG systems being built. Why were they building them? Well, first, number one, because they're afraid that government's going to impose it on them anyway. Okay, so they looked at the writing on the wall. Corporations, right? If you're a big corporation, and all these players are all part of big corporations, you don't look at what's happening next year. You look at what you plan for 5 years into the future. You plan 10 years into the future. You might plan 20 or 30 or 40 years into the future, depending on what kind of business you are. Sure. That's what you do. So when they're looking at the regulatory landscape, and they're looking at government, and they're looking at the trends that are going on behind the scenes, and they're meeting with people in government at Davos, and they're doing all these things, the things they're hearing are, we're going to move in this direction. And so are you on board, or are you not on board? And there's a I don't know that you necessarily have to have an explicit threat. There's an implicit threat when you just have government talking about building these systems, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of history from the perspective of these big corporations, right? And the other thing to keep in mind is that this isn't just in America. These things are happening in Europe and in other parts of the world too, but especially in Europe and in China and in Canada and elsewhere. So you might be in America, you might be a Coca-Cola, right? And you might be based in America, but you do lots of business all over the world.
Sure.
And so you can't just say, well, this is what America wants. You have to worry about the regulatory landscape everywhere. And so there was this implicit threat, maybe even explicit threat, that you're going to go along with this or you're going to get left behind. And this has been born. We know that this isn't just a theory. I mean, I'm theorizing about when those threats started, but we know for sure that there are people in government calling for this system to happen. And earlier in 2021, and this goes back actually a couple years at least, but in 2021, the European Parliament, which is one of the major it's the legislative body essentially for the European Union, they passed a resolution calling for a mandatory ESG system in the European Union for many small companies in the European Union and basically all large companies in the European Union. And it wasn't just for those companies. It was also for all of the companies in the value chain, the supply chain. And so if you do any business at all with a European Union company, under this resolution that was passed by the European Parliament, you would have to comply with at least some aspect of their mandatory ESG scores. And if you aren't scoring well with your ESG scores, or you're not complying with their standards, then based on this thing that was passed by the European Parliament, you could be punished monetarily or otherwise. Maybe they could even shut you down eventually by a national government in the country you're operating in. So that has not yet, I think it will become law, because there's another round of action that needs to occur before it becomes law in the European Union. The European Commission needs to formally propose it and approve it and everything. But the European Parliament overwhelmingly supported it. It's highly likely the European Commission is eventually going to put this in place. So if you're a big corporation and you're hearing rumblings about this a few years ago, and you're saying to yourself, whoa, you mean to tell me that in Europe we're going to have this? It's going to be the law if I want to do business there? Then if you're a big corporation, of course you're going to go along with that, right? Then there's been rumblings in the United States from various regulatory agencies and other things that they might be doing this. The Biden administration has already put things into play, laying the groundwork right now for having mandatory ESG disclosures at the SEC and elsewhere. So the point that I'm getting at is this just didn't happen this year. It's been going on for a long time. And they've been hearing this, these big corporations. They know that it's coming, and they're engaged in these conversations. And so they started putting the infrastructure in place out of fear.
Well, what was that? There was one quote.
That's part of it.
There was one quote that was it was during the COVID-19, and it was after a bunch of stimulus rounds of packages, stimulus packages went out, trillions of dollars were being spent in the United States and around the world. And there was a quote by someone that was sympathetic to the Great Reset that was like, maybe we should start modeling these stimulus packages to not just fill the cracks of the old system, but instead trying to push, the economy and society in a different direction or something like that. You remember what quote I'm talking about? I don't know if it was Klaus Schwab, but it was somebody.
Yeah, I think that was that was Klaus Schwab.
Okay,
yeah, but yeah.
So it was that idea that, like, because that's another thing, whether this is self-imposed because of implicit or explicit threats or whatever for corporations to play this game or be left behind. But there was also the government aspect of this, right? Because who's a bigger customer, who's able to wield more power and influence and money than the governments, right? Especially when they could just print it out of thin air.
Yes.
So, if we're going to pass another multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package, we got to make sure that the companies and stuff that are getting this money, this stimulus, are deserving of it, right? So you've got that Klaus Schwab. I think it was him. I don't want to miss.
I think it is. I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah I mean, we're not 100%.
The rhetoric of these Great Reset people, at the very least, was pushing for this concept that if we're going to helicopter drop money from the government, freshly printed dollars from the government, maybe we should kind of push it in a specific direction.
Exactly.
Hey, guess what? ESG gives us a pretty good roadmap of which direction to go for, right?
Right.
And then you brought up Joe Biden and his administration, right? And that ties in pretty nicely with his Mao agency, right? The Made in America agency that he created, I think fiat via executive order, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yeah.
Basically said that it was called Made in America, right? So it sounds good to even us Trump supporting types, right? That we're, the money that's being handed down by the government or contracts that are being carried out by, private companies and all of that stuff has to be made in America, right? Something along those lines. But in it was language that was making sure that this money goes to corporations that are like ESG complicit or something like that. I'm probably mangling a little bit, but
no. Essentially, what it was is they created this Made in America office to say we're going to prioritize American products over products from overseas. But then they slip in these lines about, well, but it's not just any American company. It's going to be the companies that share our priorities and the companies that are adopting, responsible practices and that care about the environment and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's all ESG stuff. And how does the government know who the company is? Every time they get an application for a government contract, are they actually going to go investigate that company to find out if they're, they are environmentally friendly enough? No, they're going to look at their ESG score.
Exactly.
That's how this is all going to work. So yes, the Made in America office, which is the official name of it, and yes, the acronym is MAO. So we do call it the MAO agency, like Mao Zedong, the tyrannical former leader of China, communist China. I think that is a perfect example of this. Yes, absolutely. So you had government on the one hand, incentivizing in some ways and threatening in other ways for this whole thing to happen. Then you had, in addition to that, you had investors who were brought on very early on. Lots of big investment management companies like BlackRock, like State Street Global Advisors, others, who were brought in very early on all over the world, including some governments and unions and things like that, because they control big pension funds and all of that. And they were brought in and they were told, look, we want you guys to push these left-wing causes from an investor's perspective. Because if you, the shareholder, go to a board meeting or go to an annual meeting or go speak in front of the board or whatever, you have a lot more clout than we do as politicians, unless we pass a law, which is really hard to do. But you guys can just go there right now and say to them, hey, you need to adopt this policy, or you need to do this, or you need to go green. And they have to listen to you if you have enough money and you have enough clout and you have enough stock. And so it started as a very small group of people who were signing on to this in the like mid to late 2000s. And it became a much bigger thing during the Obama era. And now it is absolutely massive. There are literally thousands of investment groups, pension funds, etc., governments in some cases, all over the world that have agreed to promote this ESG system or sustainable investment. A variety of different terms are used for all. It's the same concept. Thousands of them. And together, there is this one group in particular called the Principles of Responsible Investment, which came out of the United Nations. The people who have agreed to the Principles of Responsible Investment, these investors and investment groups alone, control more than $100 trillion of assets under their management. It doesn't mean they own it themselves necessarily, but they control it because they're investment management companies. $100 trillion with a T, trillion. They have so much money. They have so much power that if they work together, which is why they created this Principles of Responsible Investment group, if they could get enough of these people to work together and say, this is the way we want it to be, then it doesn't matter what customers want. It doesn't matter what employees want. It doesn't matter what the stakeholders in that society want. All that matters is what the people in the Principles of Responsible Investment want, because they control $100 trillion worth of assets. And how do you compete with that?
Right.
You can't. And so that's what's been happening is these investors, investment management groups in particular, that control lots of wealth, have gone to companies and said, we want you to have, this is a real example, we want you to have half of your board of directors as women, or we're going to throw you out and we're going to find people, managers who will come in and do this. We want you to go green. We don't care if you're ExxonMobil and your whole business is built on fossil fuels. We want you to go green anyway. Oh, you don't want to because it's bad for the company? All right, we'll get rid of you. We'll find someone else who will do it. This is the kind of thing that's been going on.
Yeah, this is the Great Reset. I mean,
this is the Great Reset.
Just see, play this out for a little bit. You know, like, again, AOC-led Green New Deal type legislation doesn't have to pass for massive changes to occur in our energy system in the United States when, conglomerates are working with each other to force these things to happen without any legislation required. Like this is the most powerful thing that we have been up against, at least in our lifetimes, at the very least.
Without a doubt. So
this is elite collectivist control, top-down centralization of society and the economy in the same way that the Marxists and the socialists in history wanted to do but failed to do because they only had the levers of government at their control at best case scenario.
Right.
This is beyond what has happened in the past.
Exactly. Now there is and if people are paying really close attention, there is something that, what I just described, this sort of begs the question of why would the investors go along with this? Why do they think that they're going to make money off of it? Well, there are two reasons for that, okay? The first is they believe they're going to make money off of it because they think government's going to pump a bunch of money into this. And so they think that it's a circle, right? The government prints money, they pump it into these causes that they favor. Yep. The investors say, you have to do it. We want to go in this direction. Go in this direction. Adopt green energy, for example. Go in that direction. We don't care if solar panels and windmills are more expensive. Go in that direction. They go in that direction. Those companies get money from the government and everybody gets rich, right? That's part of how this works. The other part of it, though, is that they've been printing, the Federal Reserve and other central banks have been printing so much money and funneling it into the financial system. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars have been printed over the past decade. Just over the past couple of years, trillions of dollars have been printed. I think I saw somewhere that it was something like 40%. It was something like that. I think it was about 40% of all dollars that exist in the world were created within the last year or two.
Yes.
Okay? So that's how much money has been made. Most of that money, a lot of that money, has ended up in the hands of the same people that we're talking about here. All of these investors, all these big financial institutions, these big corporations. Why? Because if you're a bank and you just got a bunch of printed money from the Federal Reserve, which, by the way, is banks, the Federal Reserve is composed of private banks mostly. They, or all, I think all of them, right? We don't know for sure, I guess, but that's the speculation. They print the money, they give it to essentially themselves, and then who are they going to loan it to? They're going to loan it to the people who they think are best situated to pay them back. Who's that? The people with all the money. So they give these loans for practically nothing to investors and corporations and people with billions and billions of dollars. Those people get richer and richer and richer. They've got all this extra money floating around. So what do? They say, we're going to buy stock. We're going to gobble up even more assets, and we're going to make these corporations do the things we want. Why? Because if we don't play ball with the central banks and we don't play ball with government, they're going to cut off the gravy train. And we don't want that. We want more printed money. That's what we want, because we're getting rich off of this. And when you look at groups like BlackRock and these other big, massive investment management companies, they have trillions of dollars more. BlackRock has trillions more than it had just a couple years ago. Just a few years ago. They've added trillions in a few years. That's printed money. That's not money that they went out and earned in any kind of reasonable way. It's not like the world just in the midst of a pandemic all of a sudden became more efficient and produced more products and goods and services and more people. And no, people were dying, millions of jobs lost, huge amounts of poverty, fear, and all the stuff, lockdowns, and yet BlackRock got trillions of dollars more assets under management. It's from the printed money. So they take all this money that's been funneled into the system from the central banks. The central banks have an agenda too. They're very open about it. They want to battle climate change. They want to fight inequality, blah, 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 blah. They funnel it into this system, and the money just circulates amongst all of these people. They're all getting richer. They're all getting more powerful, and they're all moving in the same direction now because they're incentivized by each other's actions. And so they're all in it together. And that's the thing. It's not like this big conspiracy theory because just power for the sake of power. A lot of it, that's part of it, but a lot of it is money. A lot of it is just we all are going to get rich. And isn't that great?
Yeah. So another thing, like if people are listening to this, they're like, well, we have to do something. The climate's ending, right? The world's ending, right. Climate change, all of this stuff, right? Or the other thing that they talk about, global inequity. And we could probably do a whole episode just talking about that facet of all of this. But there's also the idea that, again, the old form of this, whether they call it shareholder capitalism or just regular free markets, the idea that you're like doing this for money, is like, that's the classic way of looking at it. The Great Reset to kind of to win points for this ESG system. But it's like, who made that? Who made those metrics? Who came together and said, like, we're going to do this ESG type things? It's in essence, when you're comparing it to what the old system was like, it's pretty arbitrary. And so what's like, anyone that's sitting here thinking this is the way that it's always going to be, it's crazy talk, because these metrics can change on a whim. And a whim of these elites or whoever is writing what these standards are. So in the future, right now it's just woke stuff and, making sure people get livable wages and climates, whatever, right? And there's a bunch of ridiculous stuff in all of that, right? But, well, who's to say that in the future it doesn't have, things that infringe upon Second Amendment? Maybe any banks or businesses that have anything that has to do with gun manufacturing or firearms or anything like that down their supply chain has a lower ESG score. Maybe freedom of speech stuff starts playing a factor. Maybe if you don't shut down hateful content on your websites or anything like that, or in your messaging or anything, maybe you get a lower score. Like that to me, like, it's a little bit open-ended, and maybe that's a little more conspiratorial sounding or whatever, but like, to me, that almost seems inevitable. And to me, that seems even scarier than all the stuff that we've been talking about.
You're right. Well, because I think that, and I know there are a lot of people who don't like the slippery slope argument or whatever, but what people have to understand is that once the framework is in place and the money is circulating, and all you have to do is change the metrics, and the metrics are not created by government, by elected officials.
Right.
They're created by just, bankers and corporate heads and stuff like that. And this is the thing. Do people on the left actually trust those people? Right. Do they trust the big corporations and the big banks? No, they don't trust them either. So like the idea that the left is going to be okay with this because, well, it's left-wing causes that they're supporting, so, that's fine. Well, some of them are left-wing causes, sure. Maybe even most of them are left-wing causes today. But that doesn't mean they will be tomorrow. Right. And you have no way of controlling them once this system fully goes into place. They're the ones that print the money. They're the ones that circulate the money. They're the ones that make the standards. And so they have control over this whole thing. And they say it's for you and it's for your benefit. And they'll throw you a bone here and there to make sure that you don't have an Occupy Wall Street type situation and embarrass them. But at the end of the day, they don't really care about the left. They don't really care about the right. They don't really care about anybody except for themselves and continuing to keep this system alive. And how do I know this for a fact? How do I know this? Because many of the same people involved in this system have already done dirty deals with the Chinese Communist Party, a notorious human rights violator that is right now doing all kinds of things that people on the left say, well, no, I don't support, throwing people in concentration camps. I don't support that. I don't support just bulldozing down people's homes and throwing them out of their homes. I don't support executing people because they have marijuana or something. I don't support any of those things. Well, that's the Chinese Communist Party.
Sure.
So these people are all, if they're so woke and they care so much about the planet and they care so much about human rights, why are they doing business with people who are throwing people in concentration camps and building more coal plants than any other country in the world, basically combined, and doing all the other things that the Chinese Communist Party is doing that don't align with woke cause? That is proof that this isn't really about that. It's about something else. And that something else is consolidating wealth and consolidating power for themselves.
So we've only got a few minutes left. I was gonna open it up for you to be like, all right, well, talk us off the ledge here. What are some solutions to fight against this? And I will say that when we were, working on the book and all of this, again, comes out in January, that last chapter of how to fight back against this was probably took the most effort out of any of the other chapters to put together, because this is such a titanic thing that we're fighting against. It's like, well, how do we stop this? It seems like it's just barreling downhill at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So how do we stop it? So you might, for some of the detailed responses and solutions and how to fight back against this, we could probably get into it a little bit. But I will say, or you could just read the book when it comes out, but I will say that us just exposing this concept as much as we have and through the channels that we've been able to expose this, it has had an effect on them.
Yeah.
So let's end this off playing one of their videos here. This is basically a response to people like us talking about the Great Reset.
Yeah. This was played at a conference that occurred so remember, they launched this in the middle of 2020. This was played at a conference, I think, at the start of 2021. It was supposed to be a big event about the Great Reset. They did have it, and they did do some stuff with the Great Reset, but they also essentially semi-apologized for even coming up with the marketing slogan.
Right.
And so it's pretty incredible, but that's the context of it. This is after there had been lots of criticism leveled at them for it.
Yeah. All right. So let's just play like a minute of this here.
Whoa, they've got us here.
With everything falling apart, we can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before. Ways that better address so many of the challenges we face. And that's why so many are calling for a great reset. A great reset? That sounds more like buzzword bingo masking some nefarious plan for world domination. Hands up, this kind of slogan hasn't gone down well. But all we really want to say is that we all have an opportunity to build a better world.
That's it. That's all we want to say.
And it's not surprising that people who've been disenfranchised by a broken system and pushed even further by the pandemic will suspect global leaders of conspiracy. But the world's not that simple. Every one of us has differing priorities, values, and ideas.
They're just all encapsulated in the ESG scores.
That's part of why solutions are so hard to come by.
I love that.
Why we all need to be involved in the decision making. Because whether it's politicians, CEOs...
Okay, pause it right there. So, first of all, I wanna say that, think about this. They're apologizing for coming up with the phrase "the Great Reset." Essentially, they're saying, "Yeah, it sounds like this, and we understand why people who are, the system's so broken, why they would think this sounds like a conspiracy theory." That's them admitting that this has not happened. This is not. In fact, didn't even she say this didn't go over well? I mean, that's them admitting that they've really screwed up. But the other thing I wanted to point out is that they then show, and if you're watching us on YouTube or any of the other places where we're going to play this video, you'll see this on Facebook and Rumble and other places. You'll see that there's a video. They have a picture here that they photoshopped together. If you zoom in, you could tell it's crudely photoshopped of all these world leaders who are, and they got a big World Economic Forum banner type thing in front of them, right? Now, this is a video that's supposed to make us feel better about the Great Reset. That's what this video is supposed to be. Then they show us this picture of all these people, and they're supposed to make us feel better. Now, I just want you to hear some of the people who are here, right? I don't know all of these losers, but I do know some of them. You've got Bono in the back. I think that's Bono, right?
I think so.
You got George W. Bush. He's in the mix, right? So obviously that's going to make everyone feel much better about things who's a Republican, because they all love George. All right, you got Pharrell. He's a rapper. He's over there, right? So there you go. If you like rap music, nothing to worry about. But then there's all these other characters who obviously I don't trust. We got Al Gore, inventor of the internet. We got Vladimir Putin. That's my favorite one in the bottom left, because of course, nothing will make me feel better and help me sleep at night than knowing that Vladimir Putin is a fan of the Great Reset. Is that really true? Right. I don't even know if he is. Yeah, they just threw him in there.
I don't know why they threw him in there.
I don't either. They've got Greta, who thinks that literally we're all going to die from climate change, like any minute now. You got Joe Biden, who barely knows his own name. And you've got Christine Lagarde here in the front. That's this woman in the front. She's the head of the European Central Bank. She believes that the central banks of the world should be involved in policymaking, and that they should print money and distribute money based on fighting climate change and other left-wing causes. Yeah. These are the people that are supposed to make us feel better.
Right.
They're the ones who we're supposed to look at and say, oh, they're just like me. Bono and Greta and Al Gore. And is that a Trump? Who's that on the right? Is that Ivanka Trump? I think that might be Ivanka Trump. Yeah. They might got Ivanka Trump. It's like none of these people are relatable to me. None of them. None of them. I don't want any of them representing me. None of them know anything about my life. And so the fact that they would even put this video together is proof of how delusional these people are and how out of touch with reality that they are.
So again, the Great Reset, this was not a term that we came up with. This was based on all of those quotes that we started reading at the beginning. We started off this episode reading at the beginning of this, right?
Right.
The Great Reset. And I said, when we had that initial conversation on the phone about the Great Reset and how we're going to have to keep tabs on this, I said how we've got to use this term, the Great Reset, as a battering ram against them because it sounds nefarious, right?
Yeah.
So them saying, yeah, we apologize for that. It didn't go down well. And then not only that, but when their upcoming meetings was going to be called the Great Reset. And then it got delayed and delayed and delayed. And then they were finally going to have this meeting and they didn't call it the Great Reset anymore. They called it something else. And it was just it was clear to us that they were running away from
the policies stayed the same, but the marketing changed.
Absolutely. But this should be proof that even these people that wield hundreds of trillions of dollars in influence in all of this and hold all of these positions of power throughout the world are still scared of Justin and I when we talk about the Great Reset and we use their terms.
They're scared. They're scared of regular people speaking out against this. They're scared of writers writing about it. They're scared of radio talk show hosts talking about it. They don't. They're the bank robber robbing the bank, and they're out on the street. And they're looking for the getaway car. They've almost made it home free. The last thing they want is people on the side of out on the sidewalk pointing at them saying, this guy is the guy who robbed the bank right here. Exactly. He's the one. They don't want that. They just want to walk out of the building and quietly go about their business and no one notices them. That's what they're going for. Yeah. And by the way, we know for a fact, because we've had banks reach out to people like Glenn Beck and others when talking about this very topic, saying, no, you know, you don't really understand. We're not saying you factually got something wrong, but you know, that's not really our intention. We're not good. We're not trying to do anything nefarious here.
Right.
You know, why would they care what Glenn Beck has to say? Why?
Yeah.
Because they are afraid of being called out about
exactly
this.
right.
That's
So
the point.
The thing that you can do at home, the reason why we make videos like this is just for you to know what the Great Reset is, what it actually is, and not like the conspiratorial side of it that you'll find on like Wikipedia or something like that. And know what it is and be able to call people out on it, you know, when this topic comes up. Like, the more you know about it, the more light that you shine on this, the best disinfectant is light, right? So that's what we're trying to shine a light on all of this, trying to get this word out there as much as possible. That's why we dedicated the first real episode of Justin and Donald Save America to this topic.
That's right.
We are long, Justin. Is there any other things you want to get off your chest before we sign off for the week?
No, I gotta go see my therapist because anytime I talk about this topic, I can't sleep for like a week. So
no kidding. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us. That'd be greatly appreciated. If you're watching this on YouTube, the easiest thing that you could do is hit the like button, hit the share button, leave a comment. It might seem like nothing, but it really does help us when it comes to like the algorithm and making sure that our content is put in front of more eyes. You know, so it's free. So do it. Please. Thank you. If you want to see more of the content, especially about the Great Reset, we have stoppingsocialism.com. You can find a lot of our stuff spread across social media, whether it's Stopping Socialism on Facebook, Stopping Socialism TV. We're on Twitter. We have a Parler account. We have Justin has a Getter account. He's super hyped on that one.
I am.
Justin, where can the people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on just about every platform you can imagine at this point.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.